How many times have your grandparents, or even your parents and uncles, told you that the past was much better? In one way or another, John Ford's How Green Was My Valley reminds us of this, but it's not only a classic about nonsense nostalgia. The real axis of the film is memory itself.
Can I believe my friends all gone, when their voices are still a glory in my ears? No, and I will stand to say no and no again, for they remain a living truth within my mind.
We live through each other's memories. Through the memories of who, now over 60 years old, we see alive before our eyes the story of his own family when he was just a teenager. A simple daily family life that beautifully reinforces the sense of community and fraternity that can be found within a home. A home commanded by a respectable father, where everyone contributes, the mother and daughter making the house warm and welcoming, while the men go out to work, bringing back money that is then shared equally under the father's guidance. Those men, returning from the mines, would literally wash away the black dust and darkness of those depths before entering the home, the very heart where all life happened, and where new bonds were forged, like a marriage that unites the entire community in joy and fraternity. The great catalyst of the story is precisely the changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution, and the deep shifts in labor production caused by technological revolution. In other words, the film shows us how technological change digs deeper and deeper, unearthing not just coal, but the worst impulses of man. Through whose narration, we witness a gradual erosion of tradition, fraternity, and of the culture itself of that community. Who himself embodies these transformations. In his life we see how, within a single generation, customs that seemed eternal vanished almost overnight, and who, in fact, ends up truly benefiting from the reckless use of production innovations. The valley, once green and radiant, with its bright natural landscape, is scarred and blackened by endless digging. The mines stand as a symbol of humanity's lowest desires, the restless thirst for profit, with little care for the people who form that community. In other words, you may find valuable metals while digging, but you might also soil yourself in the process of chasing worldly prosperity. It doesn't take long for the first injustices to appear. Wages suddenly drop without explanation, even while the work remains the same. Naturally, whose older brothers rise up in protest, calling for the formation of a union. Their father, however, clings to prudence, resisting the idea and insisting that things will not change, choosing to negotiate as the trusted spokesman of the miners. But what the story shows us is that he gradually loses control, not only over the community, but even within his own household. Once a pillar of respect, he is isolated by the revolutionaries, and his family itself is shaken to its core. Chief and queen of that house, the mother resists the community's delusions, and in one providential accident, nature itself intervenes, leaving Hu and his mother paralyzed and bedridden. From that bed, Hu's path begins to represent the change that takes place when simple miners, who once had little or no education, can now acquire culture and contemplate beauty. The boy who once lived under the shadow of the mines now rises, lifted by the guidance of the village spiritual authority, a new shepherd for the people. And it is this pastor, when asked, who sides with the workers, affirming the justice of unionizing. In time, after hardship and a long strike, the miners return to work. While watching his brothers leave to fight for their rights in unions or to seek work abroad, who, climbing and struggling to stand again, embodies the new generation of miners who, for the first time, might dream of education, provided by the state, of literacy, and of professional and life horizons beyond the pit. Here, John Ford brings one of his most powerful recurring themes, a boy becoming a man. Not through sheltering or protection, but by facing conflict head-on. By standing his ground, even fighting physically for his place in the world, who learns what it means to grow up. We see a family, therefore, that does not shield its children from the world, but teaches them that to live, and to become men, is to confront life's hardships with courage. At the same time, by choosing to remain in the mine, who shows us how the life of the new generation of miners could never be the same as the one his father had in the pit. A mine with unhealthy and brutal working conditions, where even members of whose own family suffered, His younger brother passing, and his older brothers dismissed not because of failure, but because there were countless desperate men willing to work for less. As the family dissipates, the drama culminates in Angharad, the daughter who loved the young pastor sent to their community. Yet her parents, humble as they are, confuse what it means to give their children a good life. They equate it with material stability, shielding them from hardship, even at the cost of love. But what use is material prosperity if it condemns you to a marriage without joy and true love, when the pastor, as the spiritual head of the community, seeks to keep his heart guarded and devoted to that service? However, the sadness weighing on this separated couple becomes a sign of how much the whole valley was lost to modernization. Beyond the external decay brought by mining, the deeper corruption came from within each person's soul, swallowed by darkness. The mines themselves embodied that power from below, sly, treacherous, contaminating everything, staining the natural and green life God had given, pulling the community away from the path of love. Falling wages and the fading green of the valley were only the visible surface. Beneath it, human life was being bent by unchecked greed for money and human attempt to bend reality. More than just an economic collapse, the true fall was spiritual, the loss of connection with the divine, with the Christian values that once guided them. Faith decayed into Pharisaic religion, finger-pointing, gossip, fear of divine punishment, forgetting that God is love. Against this darkness stands the pastor, a spiritual authority who sees others not as they are, but as who they can become, at the same time that we also see the friendship of two boxers, who can accomplish together what they never could alone. And in the end, even as the father, representing the pillar of tradition, head of family and community, is destroyed within the very mind that fed them, his passing does not erase his legacy. On the contrary, it confirms it. Because when a man lives nobly, he lives on in memory. Our ancestors remain alive in us. The movie, then, is not mere nostalgia for a greener past, but a reminder: we live in the memory of one another when we choose to do good, to walk the Christian path of truth and transcendent values, refusing to crawl after the world or be dragged into darkness and lowly pursuits, such as the blind chase for money. And so, even if we are struck down by this new world that tries to trample and corrupt us, it will not be the end, especially when life has been spent, or at least sought to be spent, laboring for food that does not perish.
He spoke to me and told me of the glory he had seen.
As we face yet another technological revolution, this time through artificial intelligence, John Ford's film, which even defeated Citizen Kane at the Oscars, makes us reflect on when technological change can, in fact, bring out the worst in humanity. Progress without principles buries humanity. Because in the end, wealth fades, machines rust, and valleys turn black, but what remains is the memory of love and the legacy of lives lived nobly. Storms will come, valleys may darken, but the choice is always ours: to be consumed by the shadows of this world, or to live for the light that never dies.